You are now checking out the Win Podcast, where the everyday people are the celebrities. So let's get to know them.
What's up, everybody? I'm Monica Rivera, host and producer of You Want to Do What, the podcast, and you are now watching the Win Podcast.
What up, Rick? How are you? I like all the varies. Like, no pressure at all. I got to live up to, 12 varies? I'm good.
Yeah, you got it. I met you. I always like to paint the scene of how I met these people and the connection that I have with them. So I remember Jackie. Mm-hmm. I post on Facebook, listen, does anybody know who does podcasts? I would love to have an interview, yada, yada. Jackie, she said, hit up my friend Monica. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to throw this message out and in the dark because I don't know who you are and I don't even know what you do. Right. So I did my snooping and my creeping. And I was like, oh, I like her podcast. I like what she does. You want to do what? Podcast. And I was like, this is dope. So let me send out information. So I send you information. And what I appreciate is that you actually responded. Because in this world, people don't respond, which is weird to me. It's just like, say thanks, I got it, or not interested. Right. But you didn't even give me the offer like, yeah, I'm going to do it. But you was just like, give me a couple weeks. I'm going to check in, blah, blah, blah. And you did. And then from there, we did a beautiful podcast together. You asked some awesome questions. And then I got to learn about you a little bit by going through your website. And I thought that was so dope. So thank you for doing this and coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for doing my podcast. People loved it. They loved the episode. They did.
You're lying. You're lying.
I'm not lying. I wouldn't lie to you. I had the download numbers to prove it.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. It was pretty dope doing it because usually when you do like some podcasts or interviews, people are asking I guess, they don't even, first of all, they didn't even do the research. So they didn't even watch anything, and they're just asking the generic questions. And for you, I feel like you took the time
Thank you for noticing that. Yeah.
To who's this person, and I want to know more about his story.
Yeah, that's why I started a podcast, just because I always watch these shows, and I watch a lot of daytime TV. I work from home, so I kind of have the luxury of having it on as white noise.
You work from home?
I do.
That's dope.
And I know most of the time I do.
Okay.
And so I noticed that the same celebrity would be on shows, and they'd be promoting the same movie, the same book, the same TV show, and every interview sounded exactly the same. And I thought, well, that must be frustrating for the person, because it's like the same stories all the time. And what would I want to know if I was the person that was interviewing them, or what would I want to be asked? So when I started to interview people on my show, I thought I need to ask more interesting questions and really do the research to kind of know who they are.
And you just led me into that question. It was like, why did you start this podcast? But before we could dive deeper into that, I want to know, who are you? And I want the world to know, who are you?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah, so
yeah,
we have enough
it's
time.
very meta. So I like to say I'm a titi. I have two nieces, so those two little girls I love. So one is about to be 7 and one is 9 months. And so they're just amazing to me. I'm a wanderlust. I love to travel. I'm someone who's curious. I've been curious since I was a little kid. So when you hear the stories about a kid always asking why, I never grew out of that stage. I always ask why, sometimes to my detriment. I'm a sports lover. I'm deeply passionate about the Patriots, which I'm sure will make everyone stop watching this when they hear this. But
I respect them. They're freaking good. They're fucking good. I can't. And Tom Brady, I hate him to a level. It's like, why are you so damn good? Like that.
He's amazing.
Yeah,
He's the GOAT. And I'm just somebody who's a podcaster. I'm a speaker. I'm a consultant. I help people try to get to their dreams. And I guess I should say that I'm also a marketer, because that's technically my full-time job. But I put that at the end because I truly believe that who we are is not defined by what we do. So that's why it always comes at the end.
So how did you get to that level where, you say, this is my job, this is what I do, but there's something more than me, more to me that I want to discover, or I already have a hint. It's all a matter of me trying to figure out to go after it.
So I learned a really valuable lesson when I was in my early 20s. I was working for a bank at the time. And I'd worked for this bank, and so I worked in the corporate offices. And I would work at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was a person that would leave voicemails on weekends to just be like, hey, just, like not expecting that people are going to call me back, but just so I wouldn't forget. Like, hey, by the way, like we have to make sure that we do this. And I was really dedicated to that job. And I helped someone get a job in the company who was working at another company that I worked at. And when that person came on board, he quickly moved me into a different area. So I went from managing all these people to now I was only managing 2 people. And he had given the person that he had also known all my responsibilities and essentially had demoted me. And this was someone that I had dinner in his house. I like knew his wife. I
What's
knew
his
his
name?
kids.
Say it. No, I'm kidding.
I want to say it. I'm tempted to say it. Look off that. And yeah, so I said I had done all these things for him and really had his back. And as soon as he came in, it was like the knife was in my back.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's how the corporate game works. Like everyone's here for their best interest. But it was a really valuable lesson because I was 24 at the time. So better to learn at 24 than to learn at 34.
Absolutely.
And so I thought, okay, this is the way it works in corporate America. Now I need to know that there has to be a healthy separation between work life and personal life and not blur those lines anymore. And so once I sort of knew that and I learned that lesson, it was like, okay, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to do it well, but I'm also going to make sure that I have a really balanced personal life. And
then is that when the podcast kind of came in, or you just like, what were you doing in between that, I guess, to discover like, I just got to find that passion?
No, so I think it was, I still worked hard. I still climbed the corporate ladder, but it was always kind of with that in mind of like, don't get too close to anybody. These people are your coworkers and not necessarily your friends. And just kind of being really healthy about what that was.
Right.
And I was no longer leaving calls at 2 o'clock in the morning on the weekends to someone because I realized I don't want to be that invested in a role because a company can cut you at any time and for whatever reason. And if you're so invested in that, that's how you start to lose your identity because you start to think, but I'm this job. I'm a marketer. I'm a banker. I'm a fireman. I'm a doctor. And then if that goes away, then oftentimes you have an identity crisis like, well, if I'm not that thing anymore, then who am I? So I needed to work on who Monica was outside of that. And so I sort of became a mercenary and I would take jobs based on how much you were going to pay me. And that's how I just rolled from there on. And it wasn't healthy, but it was what I did. And
what did you discover about yourself during those times of discovery? Like, so what were some things you would share that like you found out about yourself through this whole process?
The biggest thing for me was travel. So I grew up in the Bronx and I'm first generation. So my mom was born in Cuba and my dad was born in Puerto Rico. And they weren't like really big travelers. And I think it's kind of like they had taken big trips when they came to this country. And so it was like, okay, you go to New York, maybe you go to New Jersey. You might once in a while go to Pennsylvania. And then, of course, you always go to Florida because all Latinos go to Florida at one point in their lives, right? So it's like that's kind of like the given. Yeah, exactly. So I had done those things. But I realized like there was so much else that I wanted to see. And the good thing about that first job out of college is that I got a chance to travel on other people's money because they were corporate trips.
They still there? Because I would love
I know. So that was really nice. So I remember like 2 months into the job, they were like, oh, there's a trip to Las Vegas. And I thought, Las Vegas? Like, I've never been to Las Vegas. And then I remember going into the Bellagio Hotel, it's actually the Venetian, I'm sorry. We're the Venetian. If you go into that room, it has like the 2 steps that go down into a living room. And for me, I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember calling my dad, you will not believe where I'm staying.
He's like,
They
Florida.
have steps. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Florida, they have steps to go into a living room. And like my mind was blown because if we had ever traveled, it was like Econo Lodge, Best Western. And now here I am in this hotel with like this canopy bed and I'm just like, what am I doing here? And there was all these like pinch me moments of like this girl from the Bronx sort of being in these places and going out to fine dining where I would always order a Coke and everybody else was ordering cocktails and I'm just like, OE? Like, right? Like, that's what I, right? I had a 40 when I was growing up. Like, I knew they didn't have that, so it was like a Coke.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I ever had mashed potatoes from a restaurant, I swear I thought to myself, these taste better than KFC. I kid you not.
But you get them real though.
But I couldn't tell anybody that because I knew everyone would look at me like I was crazy. So in my head, I was like, these are better than KFC.
You should have said
because
that.
I had never experienced that before. And I was like, this is amazing. So after getting a taste of that, I realized I wanted to travel more. And so I started to save so that I could do that on my own. I've seen 48 of the 50 states, like all by road tripping. And then I just started to travel to Europe and things like that. And so that was like the biggest change for me, being aware of things outside of the Bronx, outside of myself. And that's where a lot of transformation came.
And then you invested in the mashed potatoes with KFC.
I did, yes, exactly. I still love them though. I can't even front. I still
had that,
love
like,
them.
no lie, I had it like 2 weeks ago. It was like, I forgot how this good,
It's
how
still
good
good.
this tastes. I want to know basically, when does the podcast now comes in where you want to create something that's yours, create something that you're going to learn from, and now take this journey of podcasting and basically describe what led to that.
So it's so many years later. That's the thing. So I had been working for, like almost 15 years in corporate America.
Oh, damn.
And I had known that I'd wanted to do my own thing for a long time, but I didn't know what the thing was. So I'm someone who has a lot of passion. So when you hear the advice, follow your passion, it is the worst advice to tell someone like me, because I have a lot of passions. So then it's like, well, which one do I choose? Do I choose photography? Do I choose writing? Do I choose this or that and this? And I couldn't decide. And that indecision oftentimes leads to kind of like a paralysis. Like you don't know what to do. I had been listening to podcasts for probably 12 years.
Damn.
And I was like a huge fan. I was like OG podcast head, right? Like I really was. Bill Simmons was the first show I'd ever listened to. It was a sports podcast. Like I said, I'm a huge sports fan. And I would get really amped every Friday when I knew Bill's show was coming out. And it felt like Bill was my friend. Like if I walked down the street and I ran into him, I could just talk to him about whatever. And I kind of loved that intimacy that podcasting brought. In 2013, I bought a mic.
Okay.
I didn't use the mic. It could have been a hunk of junk, Rick. Like, I didn't even know if it worked. They could have sold me, like, a lemon mic.
You just bought this mic.
I bought this mic, and I took out the box and just sat there like, okay, that's cute. And then, like, I just, like, walked away from it because I was like, what am I going to say? Like, I just,
funny.
again, felt like, I don't know if I'm ready to do this. Who's going to want to hear what I have to say? And I just let it collect dust. And I swore, like, every time I walked past the mic, it was, like, staring at me with judgment. Like, you're just going to sit
like,
here. You're not even going to know if I
You're
work.
just going to eat that mashed potato. Not even, like, speaking this mic.
Right there. He's going to put that napkin on top of me, like, just to hold it.
I got gravy on the mic. Now, really? You're not going to wipe
I'm
me
all
up?
messy. And so that's kind of like how it was. And then one day I decided, you know what? I'm in this place where I just need a change. I was feeling like I wasn't getting opportunities that I wanted in my job. I knew it wasn't really the place that I wanted to be. And I'm a big believer that if a certain door is not opening for you, it's because God doesn't want that door to be opened. So if you keep knocking, all you're going to end up with is bruised knuckles. And that was what was happening to me. But what was also happening is that my confidence was starting to diminish. So think about like Christmas lights. Like when the first bulb goes out, like you don't really notice it, right? And then the second bulb goes out and you probably don't notice that. But then one day you come home and you're like, babe, don't the tree look a little janky? Like, what's up with the tree? What's happening? And it's because the lights are slowly going out one by one. And for me, I felt like that was my confidence level. And I thought, well, this has to stop. Because now I'm feeling a way about myself. And it's bleeding over, not just professionally, but now into who I am. And so I just decided, you know what? I'm going to see what I have to say. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to see what comes out. And that's what I did. I basically recorded something. Then I Googled how to start a podcast. After that, it was a mess. The first episode is a mess. I say that proudly. A lot of people take down their first episode because they're like, oh, I don't want people to know how I first sounded. I leave it up there because I want people to know also that sometimes it's going to be messy, but it's not always going to be messy. And mine was a mess. And then I just said, you know what? I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to make sure I put something out. And that was the only goal at first. And then every week it got better. And then here I am.
Well, everyone sucks in the beginning. Like, that's one thing that, like, people need to realize, I feel, that no matter what you're going to do in life, that first job, even when you learn how to first walk, you suck at walking. You just like,
keep falling down.
Yeah,
right?
you know what I'm saying? So you
walk,
gotta keep doing that, and then you'll get better. No actor, no actress, no nothing got who and what they are just overnight. It takes time.
But we live in this place now, right? Like in social media where everything is so curated that we're not seeing the behind the scenes. We're only seeing the after.
You're seeing
and that
perfect.
makes people a lot of disillusionment comes with that, because they think you just jump out the gate and it's perfect.
Yep.
When it's not really like that. And then you're measuring yourself against curated images that someone might have taken 50 times, video people could have recorded 10 times, and you don't really know what that process is. So you just feel like, oh my God, mine sounds like this, but it's supposed to sound like this. And I just realized quickly, like, I have to let go of those feelings and just make the best show that I can make, and eventually it will get better. And that's what happened, luckily.
How did you come up with the idea of the show? You do want to do what, and kind of, I guess, put the pieces around it, like these are going to be the topics, these are going to be the people, maybe per se, that I want to interview. How long did it take for you to get the idea, and where did it come from?
It took 3 days for me to say that I'm actually going to do this and put it out into the world. Like, I knew that I needed to move quickly, because if not, I would not be talking to you today, because I wouldn't have a podcast. Yeah, and I wouldn't have a podcast. I would have talked myself out of it. And it would have just, the mic would have had even more dust on it. And, like, you know what I mean? More mashed potatoes would have been eaten, and that would have been it. You know what I mean? And so I needed to just kind of put it out, so I put it out really quickly. But then for me, it was about, how am I going to learn to get better? So it's putting myself in rooms with people much smarter than I am, trying to get to know people who do it better than me, or who I want to sort of emulate in some way. And when I say emulate, it's not style, it's more like sound. Like, how can I get the sound to be where I want it to be? Because that's always like the key. You want to be pleasing to like someone's ears. So how can you do that? And really, I'm very honest. The show started because I needed the show. I needed it for me. And as soon as I started to do those episodes, I would say within the first 4 weeks, all my lights had turned back on. Because I realized I am capable, and I was right. Those doors weren't opening because those doors weren't for me. And now that I'm doing this, look at all these doors that are now open. So you want to do what is basically like what I would tell myself when I would say, you're going to start a podcast. I would say, you're going to do what? You want to do what? Like, that was the thing that I said to myself. And so I thought, there has to be other people that feel similar to me, and I'm going to talk to those people. And that's how the show sort of evolved. And I spent the first 6 months not interviewing anybody. It was just solo episodes, because I wanted to feel comfortable behind the mic. I wanted to build some credibility with my audience, so they knew who I was. And then once I interviewed people, I felt like they could trust me with their time, because I've kind of put in this work of, 25 episodes at that point.
See, I love that, because now you're learning from two worlds. One world where the first 6 months you're learning about yourself.
Right.
And then the other 6 months, now you're hearing stories that you can either relate, or now learning some additional things. So I want to know, what did you learn from those, any type of story that you was interviewing these people, they like, it kind of like affected you, on a level that, made you think or change certain things in your life, just hearing, because now you learn from yourself for the first 6 months, and now you're hearing other stories. So what were some of those things that you learned from?
I feel, and I know this sounds kind of bogus, but I really learned from like every single guest, to the point that I feel like, oh, we're friends after this, right? And then people are like, no, we did an interview, and it's cool. Like, we're cool, but we're not necessarily friends. And I'm like here wanting to be invited to like Christmas and Thanksgiving, like, what's up? But we have such a moment, no? And so for me, like, I do kind of get close to like the people that I interview, because I am asking like more personal questions, and I am genuinely interested in who I have on the show. So there's a bunch of people who want to be on podcasts, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, like, who I want to bring onto my show, to me, is like a very personal decision for me. Like, one, I have to be interested. Two, I have to feel like it really serves the audience, and like they're going to get something out of it as well. So it's all like a personal thing for me in terms of like who I decide to bring on. I would say I interviewed an Olympian named John Coyle, and he's a silver medalist, and he basically, after he left that career, he went on to study time.
Time?
Yeah, and I'd never met anyone. Sorry? Oh, did you? Yeah. And I'd never met anybody who'd studied time before. And I'm someone who's always been, like, infatuated
like, what do you mean? Like, I may sound dumb, but I'm going to ask you, like,
No,
time, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like seconds?
Basically, he talks about the difference between chronological time, which is, like, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right? Or 7 o'clock, 7:15, 7:30, versus experiential time. So, like, take a moment that you've had, maybe with your wife, maybe as a little kid, that felt like it lasted forever. So, like, think about a summer that felt like it just went on and on. That's experiential time, because it's still just 3 months. It's the same 3 months. But the way we're experiencing those moments feel totally different.
Oh.
And so he basically just kind of blew my mind, like talking to me about
I'm blown
this.
by it. I got like
And it was,
2 seconds.
And it was like this really like amazing thing. And he tells this story about running with the bulls in Pamplona in Spain. And he tells this story and it's so detailed. And he's like, and then I did this and I moved and I really wanted to run with them. So he didn't run off to the side. He was like trying to get like a little bit of a head start on them and kind of knew his path. And he said the whole thing lasted for like less than 10 seconds. But even the way he described it, I'm like with him right there, like running with the bulls, breaking into a sweat. Like, I got this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And it was like less than 10 seconds. And he talks about like how those experiences feel so much longer to you because they mean more. And as adults, we kind of move through life, going to work, going home, watching Netflix, and those days, you don't remember them anymore. He said if you can't remember your commute to work, you might as well not have been alive at all. And to me, that was really powerful.
No, that is deep because, you know, we live in a world now where we don't appreciate our time.
Yeah.
And of course, we get stuck in this matrix of going to work, then coming home, eating, probably watch TV, and then it's like there's so much wasted time. And I guess we start to live once we get a diagnosis of something, where we already get a diagnosis the moment that we're born, because we're gonna die. Right. We're just born, but we have a limit on ourselves how much we're gonna live. Yeah. So we should value that time. So it's pretty dope. Thank you for sharing that. How time there's so many things that you could dig deep into it, and on a spiritual level, just me thinking about that really makes me reflect, like being present.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, appreciating those moments with your loved ones, whatever it is, and not taking those things for granted.
And also creating the moments, like being mindful of creating the moments. Like, how will you spend your time? Are you sure you just want to go home and just veg out in front of the TV? Like, is there nothing else you would want to do? Like, is there anything you'd want to learn? Is there any person you'd want to meet? Is there like any movie you'd want to see? Like anything to really kind of change it up a little bit. And so I know for me, like that's a really big deal. Like some people kind of hate when I say this, but I say like I haven't been bored in like 10 years. Like I just am not someone who gets bored because there's so many things I know that I can do with my time that like I just never feel bored. And so when I hear people say that, I always want to say like, can we sit down and talk about that and like kind of unpack why you feel that way? Because life is so full of opportunities, and you don't even need to have money in order to have these opportunities, in order to kind of like enjoy things you've never seen. Like how many times, like living in New York, are there things we've never seen before? Like tourist attractions we've never seen, restaurants we walk past all the time that we've never tried, like parks we've never visited. Like why not just go and see those things and experience those things? Like those are all free things that we can do, and yet we don't do those things. So for me, I feel like there's always something to make life like a little bit fuller.
I want to know what was like one of the biggest challenges that you face putting up this podcast within yourself. We talked about the confidence we use building up, but for me, I'm always interested, right? Because we spoke about it, how people think that this happens overnight, whatever, no matter what career you do, and I want them to understand a person like you that had this opportunity where you bought the mic and it's just time just wasting, and then you just finally said, fuck it, I'm going to do it. Now you're going through the process and you're learning about a lot of these things about yourself. What was one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome or is a constant thing that maybe comes up in other situations in your life that you would share?
Self-promotion, for sure. Because now it's just you, right? So I'm like the one-man band, like the army of one. So I produce the show, I edit the show, I mix the show, I market the show. I know how that feels. That just sucks. It's great, it's fulfilling, but the process is draining at times. Yeah, it is. It's a lot of stuff, and and I'm doing this every week. So every week, it's like doing that loop all over again. And so that part is challenging, and then you also have to promote it. And in the beginning, when I released that first episode, I think I told people like, oh yeah, by the way, I have a podcast. It's on iTunes. Like if you want to check it out. And people were like, what are you talking about? Because I didn't even tell anybody that I was starting a podcast. But that's always sort of been my nature. Like I'm a big person that's like, you don't want to jinx anything. You don't want to, potentially like rock the boat and say a plan out loud and then it doesn't happen.
Right.
So I'll always wait until something's already done in order for me to tell people about it. And this is like me promoting myself, because essentially in the first 6 months, it's just me talking to listeners. And so I'm essentially saying, hey, do you want to listen to me? And that felt really, I think, weird to me. Like, I feel like there's like a lack of humility in it, but that was something I had to get over. And it was actually Barbara Walters that had said something, because I felt one of the things that always bugged me about Barbara Walters is that she shamelessly self-promoted all the time. You would be having a plate of asparagus. She'd be like, this asparagus remind me of that interview I had with Castro back in '86. And you can watch that tonight on 2020 because they're actually doing a retrospective on it. And you're like, how is she doing this all the time? But like somehow she'd always insert self-promotion. And it used to really irritate me about her. And so one day she said, if I put work into something and I'm proud of the work that I've done, why wouldn't I want someone else to see it? And I thought, this is the attitude I need to adopt. If I'm putting this work, doing this every week, and I really care about what I'm saying, and I think I have a message that's going to resonate with people, why wouldn't I want to tell them about it? And then as soon as I started to embrace that, it started to feel more comfortable. And now it's like, 80 weeks into it, that it's like, now it's listen to my podcast, subscribe every Wednesday.
So now you're more comfortable now, just like letting people know, everyday people, even if you meet them on the train, like or whatever. Check it out.
Yeah.
Now, has there been moments where it's been so rewarding where you didn't expect people to listen, but then now all of a sudden they're like, hey, by the way, I checked this out, and they're like, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I have people that write to me and say, like, I used to never care when a podcast came out, but now every Wednesday I check for your podcast. And that feels like so amazing, because it reminds me when I was listening to Bill Simmons and I was waiting every Friday for his show to come out. And I'm like, I can't believe that someone's out there waiting to hear me every Wednesday. And so that's like an amazing feeling. And even more so, now I have an obligation, even to that one listener, to like not let them down. Because if they're waiting to hear my voice or hear my guest or whatever it is, then I want to make sure that I'm there for them.
What is where do you want to take this? Where do you see this going for you with the podcast?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, it's a couple things. Because again, like as someone who has a lot of passion, like I always see like lots of different paths forward. One thing, I want to help other people start their podcast. I think we have voices that need to be heard. I think as people of color, we have messages and stories that people don't always know. And if you look at the top of the charts, like when it comes to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it's not filled with a lot of people of color, which means that there's definitely a void in the marketplace, or somehow our message isn't getting all the way up to the top as it should. So I feel like I want to help amplify those voices with people and help them not make all the mistakes that I made in the first part of it, because you can get to a place where, your first episode won't be great, but it can also be a lot better than my episode was, and you can kind of avoid some pitfalls by not doing it all by yourself, and just kind of help people do that. I also want to continue to speak, so I've been really blessed that this past year I've spoken probably on like 6 or 7 national stages. I'm going to give
you a little clap on that one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Thank you. So that has been really dope. But I want to talk to people about more than just podcasting. I want to talk to them about why I started the show, which is so people can go for their dreams, their bucket list items, the things they've always wanted to try, and not be restricted by age, not be restricted by income, and really go for the things that they want, because they are all achievable. You just have to make a plan to get there. And that's what I hope to continue to do.
On your bio, I read, it says, fun has no age limit or expiration date. And to me, I love that. Because it's so true. No matter what age you are, you still can have a moment to have fun, to find your passion, to find joy, whatever it is. There's, you'll be in your deathbed, and there's still something to do in your deathbed to laugh. You know what I'm saying? So I want to know what brings you joy.
Well, what's funny is, so I mentioned my niece at the top, that she's 9 months. And so right now she's at this stage where she's standing up and not yet walking. So she's like crawling but standing up and like attempting to walk. And so there's like this playpen that sort of I call like the octagon for fun, right? Because it's like this plastic like little box or whatever. And so I'm always inside of it with her, and we're like playing inside. And somehow I always end up by myself, like in the playpen. And I look around, like the baby's not even here. How long have I been sitting in here by myself? It might be like 30 minutes. And I'm like playing with a block or like watching TV, like in the playpen. And I'm like, what am I doing here? But it happens every single time. And so like things like that, like just not being afraid to just get in the playpen or the octagon or whatever with the baby and like have a good time.
Have fun to bring out your inner child.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe like it's really important to like do those things, to laugh, to like find ways that bring yourself joy. And again, I go back to the fact that like I didn't grow up with money, so we played fire escape basketball, we played slugs on the sidewalk. All those things that I have the best memories of didn't cost any money at all. It wasn't about going on vacations. It wasn't about any of that stuff. It was those moments that I had on the block with my friends that meant the most to me. And so for me, how can I keep creating those things now?
I agree. How do you know, because we're both artists, right? Podcasting to me, it is an art form, no matter how you put it, because you are taking the time to dissect yourself, depending on what you're doing, also getting to know the other person. And people like us, we share, when we're ready, parts of our lives that were tough, and then also the triumph of it, of overcoming things. How do you know when you're ready to share personal things from your life and put it out there in the world?
I think I'm still getting to like some of those places. So I share, I think, a lot, but I haven't shared all of it. Like there's lots of pieces that I've just chosen not to share yet. Mostly because I go on instinct, like what feels right to me. Like there are times where I'll have an episode ready to go and it'll be queued up and it's going to release it on a Wednesday. And I'll say, you know what, that's not the message that I think I want to share with my audience. And I will scrap an entire episode because intuitively it doesn't feel right at that moment. And then maybe I'll save that episode for later. But I'll do that. It's very intuitive, like what I should share, what guest I want to put on, even sort of the sequence of guests. I try to stay fairly loose with it and never kind of lock anyone into a certain your episode will be released this date too far in advance, because I feel like depending on where we are in the world, what's happening to like maybe listeners' lives that might have reached out to me, maybe I want to put a different guest in that week because I know somebody really needs to hear that message. So a lot of it is based off of intuition for me.
How do you know, well, not how do you know, but how do you juggle having a 9-to-5 job? And then the common question that people, I feel, need to constantly hear, because your 9-to-5 job is not who you are. So it helps you, you got to pay rent, you got to pay whatever, you got to eat. I get that. But there's always another side of you. You did not born into this world to go right into a corporate job and just stay there forever, go on for a couple vacations, and then die, have a couple kids or whatever, and that's it. So how do you manage to juggle the 9-to-5, do your thing, and then this passion and this dream that became a reality and continuing it on?
Yeah, I wake up really early, so that's like the truth. So I wake up usually at 4, no later than 5 every day, even on the weekends. People think I'm nuts. I don't actually set an alarm clock, which is kind of crazy. That's why I say it's between 4 or 5. Like that's my superpower. And so I don't set an alarm. I just, so at some time between that hour, I will wake up. And then I will make sure I get in like 3 hours of stuff before I start like the full-time job. And for me, that's just kind of the way I do it. It's like how I structure my time. Like I'll make sure after work, I go see my niece because she goes to bed at like 7:30, right? So it's like
so
her window.
Get in that playpen.
She got like exactly. She got a small window of time before she goes to bed. And then I'll see her. I'll hang out in the octagon when she's not there for a while, read them little baby books, and then I'll leave and I'll go back home and I'll work some more. And so for me, it's just kind of like, how do you structure it? Like we all have the same amount of hours in a week. And if you really focus on like how you spend your time, you'll realize that there's a lot more opportunities there than you actually think there are for things. And as soon as you kind of see that, like if you put pen to paper and see, okay, I do, even if it's like 10 extra hours a week, well, what do you want to do with those 10 hours? Do you want to learn how to play an instrument? Do you want to learn a language? Do you want to spend time with a friend that you haven't seen in a long time? Well, you have 10 extra hours a week to do that. So kind of just being really like critical, like with your time.
No, absolutely. And I think a big part of that for me, the way I was able to have success in the shows that I have done was not only working on myself and having a spiritual family and my spiritual teacher helping with those lessons, but putting a priority on what's important. You know, do you want to go to the bar? No, I don't. I'm going to go home and I'm going to work on this show. And realizing that, okay, you need 6 hours to live, basically to sleep, right? Then you have the 8 hours you give to whatever, the job, and you have this extra amount of hours. Two of them, you have 2 hours if you just want to fuck off, and then you have another 3 hours to actually do something and really manage that time. But you have to want it. And I think in this generation that I'm seeing, there's not a lot of want of they want, but the hunger and the work that goes behind it, they don't want to do that. Everything they want is to be spoon fed. And I always remember that my brother always taught me. He said, you know, we were never born with silver spoons in our mouths. We have to work hard. And I will always remember, you know, we was by a McDonald's and this is like late at night, like 1 a.m, and I was hungry. I probably was like maybe 19, and we was in the drive-thru. I was eating like, I don't know, probably a McChicken or something. This is not even to promote a McChicken, but it was good. And
but if they want to sponsor,
why not? Bring that McChicken over here. So we're right there by the parking lot, and this guy, older guy, probably he works for McDonald's, had to be maybe 70. He was old. The guy was old. And he was just struggling to put this like bag in the garbage. And my brother said, it's like, you know, is that what you want to become? He said, not to say that this guy is not, you know, is not making a living and doing that, but he should be already in a house at this time, 70 something years old, 80 years old, whatever. He's like, is that what you want to become? And he said, what I want you to know is that you can be that, or you can actually believe in something and work hard and go after something. That will always be there. I don't know, and that always stuck to me. You know, like this whole thing of like, yeah, you can become anything you want, but the drive and the work ethic. That's something that's not bought. That's something that can't be given to you. That's something that's earned and learned.
Absolutely. I think that there's something great about this generation, though, in the fact that they're creating opportunities for themselves, because we now have like the technology so that you can create opportunities for yourself. So I love that aspect of it, of sort of challenging the status quo, of saying like, well, just because you chose to work in a job for 20 years doesn't mean that I need to do that, because life is different. And if I don't like something, then I'm going to be bold enough to make that choice and change it up for myself. I think that's great. At the same time, I do think it's important to have a long-term vision of at least what do you want your life to look like at some point, right? So when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60 years old, do I care about having a home? Do I care about having a family? Do I want to be able to travel? Like, what do you want that life to look like? Not all of the dots that connect there, but if you have an idea of where you want to go, then it helps you to sort of back into what it is that you're doing, right? Because the only way you get to that place where you're taking the cruise around the world is you have to have the money to take the cruise around the world, unless you're working the cruise, right? And if you're part of that, and then you're probably not going to get to see as much of it as you thought you would. But like, think about what you want your life to look like, and then start to design it based off of those things. And I think that's where we're sort of missing. It's like, if we only live in right now and think, well, I'm making money right now, or I'm promoting parties right now, or I'm on the gram flourishing right now, then you're not sort of thinking about down the road. And how are you still going to fulfill that vision? Because if Instagram shuts down, then there goes your modeling career, right? Or if the party scene changes up,
there
like
goes your
it
confidence
does.
too.
Exactly, right? And if the party scene changes up and like your party's not hot anymore, then that money you once made is not going to be there anymore. So how are you going to design the steps for your life? And then move in it accordingly, but always have the vision.
So now we got to know you, and this pretty much in 30 minutes you described everything you've been through. And right now I'm going to move forward to these 3 different segments that I have of the show.
Let's do it.
And the first segment is called Peekaboo, which you probably play
all the time, yeah.
but this one gets deep. Okay. So the first question in Peekaboo is, what do you hide from the world?
Oh, wow. Probably that I'm more sensitive than I appear. Yeah, so from the BX, right? BX stand up, right? Like, you have like a harder shell. And I have been through, a lot of things. I've been on my own for a really long time, and like raising myself and putting myself through school and all those things. And so I think that gives people the appearance of like, oh, she has it all together, she has it all figured out. But it's like, I'm still like soft in the center. I'm like that
I'm a
cookie,
thug,
like
but
you
I
bite.
got
Exactly.
feelings too.
I shed the thug tear every once in a while, like, you know.
Nice.
So like those types of things. Like I'm like more sensitive, and I'm also really empathetic to people. So if someone's hurting, like I feel like they're hurt on a level that like I really feel they're hurt. And unfortunately, the negative part of that is that you then can kind of carry that energy with you. And so that's something that people probably don't know.
Now, what do you show the world?
What do I show the world? I think I show the world that life is full of real possibilities, and that through my story, hopefully what I show people is that time is finite, and you have to think of time as finite and live your life according to that. So every time I talk to someone who says, oh, I always want to travel, but I just don't make the time, or I work so much I don't have time to do X, Y, and Z, or I wanted to do this, I wanted to go to that concert, but yeah, I never bought the tickets to it. Like, really challenge yourself. And I'll be like the hold on, right? Like the pain in the ass. It's like, but why? Why didn't you do that? Or what about this? Or I hear there's a show coming up here. To really kind of challenge someone. And I don't necessarily care, like, if I'm irritating you, if that makes you actually do the thing that you wanted to do. So it's like, you can hate me now, but when you're throwing your rock up at a Jay-Z show, like, you're going to be really happy that you went there.
You're just showing them that their excuses don't mean anything. You're showing them, well, look at this, the windows of opportunity.
Yeah, there's there
because people are so stuck to like, I can't, and you go and you're that friend that's like, well, you can. And like, and you're throwing it at them, and after a while, it's like, well, what is your excuse now?
Yeah, exactly.
And then a lot of people, you start realizing sometimes people don't even want to put in the work. Sometimes don't even feel that they deserve those type of things at times.
Right.
Like, why don't you want to do it? Now it's in front of you. Why don't you want to do it?
Exactly. Like, people see where I've gone on trips before, and I tell people, like, I went on that trip on a Groupon, or I went on that trip on a Living Social. Like, don't tell me, like, you need tons of money to do that, because I've actually gone to these places. Like, I'm telling you that it doesn't cost that much money to do it. So you can't throw that back at me. I've left work on a Thursday night to take a flight to go to a place and then take a red eye home on Sunday night and go to work completely tired. But you know what? Like, in those like 3.5 days that I've had, it was like an amazing time. And I wouldn't change that. Like, yeah, I sacrificed some sleep, but that's all I sacrificed. Think about how much time we sacrifice sleep because we're staying up watching like some nonsense. Why not sacrifice sleep because you're hiking the Grand Canyon?
No, it's true. It's basically you showing yourself that you can make it happen.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how hard it is or challenging, at the end of the day, you have the power to make that happen.
For sure.
So the next segment of the show is basically like death. So if you would die tomorrow at 3 p.m., what would you want to accomplish?
At 3 p.m.
At 3 p.m.
Wow, that's very specific.
Don't worry about the details of how you're going to make it. It's going to happen.
Right.
But if you know you're going to die tomorrow at 3 p.m., what would you try to accomplish?
Oh my gosh, that's like such a good question. It's probably bad that I thought, like, what would I have watched on TV that day, right? Because I'm like, what shows come on before 3? I guess, of course, like, I'd want to spend time with my nieces, right? Like, that's the biggest thing. I think I'd spend a lot of time writing letters to people, actually, because I know that I can't get to see everyone I'd want to see, like, from now until 3 p.m. So I definitely would want to write a letter to let people know, like, what they meant to me, like, advice that I want for their lives, like, things that I see them being able to do in the future. So I think a lot of it would be sort of leaving mementos for people.
That's dope.
Yeah, it would be like a really big thing for me. I'd probably go out for a drive because I love drives. I'd go on the highway. I'd punch it as fast as I could because if you give me a speeding ticket, it really don't matter because I'm only going to be here to 3 o'clock anyway. Exactly. So it really doesn't matter. Listening to music that I love. So I'd at least take time to do that and kind of just have that moment to like kind of zone out. Probably eat some chicken parm because that's like my favorite food.
No mashed potatoes?
No mashed potatoes. No, I have chicken parm. I have chicken parm. Yeah, that would be my thing. And yeah, just try to close it out with people that I love. But then I think right before 3, I'd probably go someplace by myself. Yeah.
I always love this question, right? Because it's like it's always different for people.
Yeah.
And one thing is a constant that people start to appreciate is, you know, I'll do this for me, but I want to spend some time with some family here, and you know, and to me that's always. It's always amazing to hear, you know, because I feel like it's not something that you hear a lot per se. Like family, the value of family, and me growing up, I was just like, well, I'm not as close with my family, so it's whatever. But now I am, so to hear that is always refreshing. I don't know. To me, it's like, wow, that's dope. Like, it's never self-centered to the point where like, I want to sell out this place, I want to do this, I want this Tim's, I want this blah blah, and people may say certain things like that, but they're always at a moment like, I'm gonna spend time with my family too.
And at 2:45, I would roll out by myself though, because I would, because I wouldn't want anyone to like have to experience that. So I would just kind of throw the peace sign
my
up.
My first was like, I'm doing all that stuff, right? But then I'm gonna do a comedy show, and then I'm like making them laugh. I'm laughing, but now there's a countdown: 10, 9.
That's terrible.
And I throw up the mic, and so, when you said that, I reminded.
That's awful.
But I went out happy. Like,
I guess we went out horrified. Like, that's selfish, man.
I would hate that.
That's horrible. Like, I'm trying to go out in this unselfish way, and you're like, nah, everyone gonna watch me. The mic's gonna fall. It's gonna make a loud noise. Like, that's what I'm gonna do. I mean, it's your choice.
But we was laughing though. You know what I'm saying? Where were you at? I mean, I saw Rick die, man.
I don't know if
he didn't do good on stage. Nah, he
though.
did good, but he died in the end.
Killed it. He killed it. He killed him. He killed everything. So for some people, they would be kind of sad about that. I don't know if everyone would be laughing when it hits 0. just something to consider.
I'll think about it. Next segment and the last segment is words from my spiritual teacher, Guru Enlightenment. By this time now, everyone knows that I have a spiritual teacher. She has taught me so much about myself, and she teaches spirituality. She does a lot of workshops for free and does one-on-one sessions with people getting their life on track. She has many gifts that she is able to help you and guide you in your life. And of course, the description of her website and her book is always going to be in the description. So the purpose of this is to share a little bit of her writings that she puts on Facebook and even her book, so people can wake up, get a taste, and maybe see more about her. So this one is from her website, and it's called, she wrote something called, the title's called Wings, and this is a piece from it. There is a time where we need to say, enough is enough. And I have seen enough tears and pain that comes with so much hatred. I have seen the darkness, and now I want to see the light. Now it's time to fulfill my life with my dreams, whether they are short or long. I'm going to use my wings, my courage, and my strength so that I can complete what I was meant to do. How do you feel hearing that?
I think it's beautiful. I think that the best choice that we can make for ourselves is to trust ourselves and to go in the direction that like our heart tells us. I think we always hear like the message inside of us, even if it's a small thing, even if the message is go to the gym, go to the gym. Like that message is there for a reason, right? To take care of your health, right? To try to, get control of that or whatever it is, right? But listen to what that voice says. And for me, I spent a lot of time like shushing the voice, knowing that I was meant to do more than just the life I had lived up to that point. And that's not to say that I was ungrateful, but I knew that there was another purpose for me and I was meant to be used in a different way. And so it resonates with me because I feel like when I started to answer that voice is when my life changed.
Yo, I think she's one of the first people, right, ever to relate that to their lives. Now, I've been starting to share this now that I don't pick basically, oh, this would fit this person, this would fit that person. I'll go in the book or I'll go on the website and I'll just scroll and then I'm like, boom. Then I'll look at a brief what it's about. So, okay, cool. But I shit you not, every episode, the passage that I'm reading relates to that person's whole journey. And when I was writing that down, I said, okay, cool. And I just got to know your whole story.
Right.
I was like, oh shit, like this basically sums up her whole journey and how, what you just said, and using your wings and going after what you want, the courage, the strength, and making it happen. And I'm usually too like the person that's like, they'll share something how they felt, and I'm like, this kind of relates to your life. You mind if I share? But you just did it. I'm like, you got it. So thank you for sharing that.
No, cool.
And basically, being open to hear the message. And I'm sorry, but that's pretty much the end of the Win
Oh,
podcast.
that's sad.
So,
As long as it's not 3 o'clock.
No, it's not 3 o'clock.
Tomorrow at
I'm
3
not-
o'clock, I'm gonna be like, oh shit, what's about to happen?
Monica, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this and to being open and to share your story. And most importantly, I sincerely want to thank you for allowing me to share my story on your podcast. At the end of the day, you didn't have to. You could ignore the email. You could have not even paid attention. You could have deleted it, put me in spam. But you didn't. You actually took the time to let me see what he's about, and did the research. And then I was grateful that I fit into the goal and the idea of your podcast. So thank you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you for
didn't.
having me. No, thank you for having me on your show. And I think that every relationship we encounter is there for a purpose. And so that email came to my inbox for a reason. When we had our interview, it was a few months later. It was for that reason. Like the timing, I trust the timing of God. And I feel like we're exactly where we're supposed to be. So thank you for having me.
Beautiful. Before we go, of course, all your information is going to be in the description. But if you want to let people know where they can reach you, check out your podcast, you can say it now. And of course, it's going to be in the description. It's going to be blasted everywhere.
Thank you. Yeah, so the podcast is You Wanna Do What? WANNA, Do What? It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to it. Hit me up Instagram. It's also You Wanna Do What? The branding is all the same. And if you want to know it or you want to work together on podcasts, I'm always available. So it's youwannadowhat.com. And just thank you for this time here. And I hope this story resonated with someone. And yeah, I look forward to more conversations with you in the future.
Once again, thank you everybody for checking out another episode of the Win Podcast. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, Instagram at the Win Podcast. And any information you want to check out, just look at the description box and all the information is there. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed another episode. Peace.